I'd like to introduce our guest for today. This is somebody I've known for a very long time. It's my friend. It's one of like the smartest people I know, but also very hardworking. He was one of my advisors, and he's originally from Zimbabwe. Got a scholarship, has been to Oxford and Harvard, right? And then went ahead to work with Strive Masiwa, the billionaire, right? And then like sitting next to Strive and working with Econet, the group, and just that experience. And then finally quit to start his own company, which is also super revolutionary. What they've done is to create an alternative credit scoring company, the first that's accredited in Africa. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to get up on your feet and let's give a warm round of applause to my friend Dalumuzi Mhlanga. Well, welcome to Pranary and welcome to the Fireside Chat, Muzi.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Muzi, tell us about like your background. Where did you grow up, and what type of kid were you?
Okay, that's a great question. I have to sort of like think back. I was a really naughty kid to start with, but I'm from Zim. I grew up in a town called Bulawayo. It's the second largest, one of the very interesting things, and I suppose it sort of like links to my journey, is that I grew up in Zim when things were really tough. So, there were pictures of people queuing up for cooking oil, for money, for sugar. I was in those queues very often, and it helped me build some level of incredible resilience. So a lot of the times, people, I've lived in the US, the UK, etc. I actually left the UK when I was maybe 2 years away from getting permanent residence. And like, why would you leave the UK and like, this really great stuff to go to SA and, face load shedding? Well, there wasn't load shedding at the time. But ultimately, really, it's just that experience of having a really tough childhood that I think built quite a lot of resilience. I think there's only, we hit rock bottom, myself personally, as a family, etc. And I just know how bad things can get. And so when the hard knocks of entrepreneurship sort of like really come, I think, that's resilience that I built up when I was a child kind of like shows up.
Yeah. Your high school journey and then varsity. Tell us about your experiences there and what it was like.
Yeah. So I grew up in Zim, and then I went to high school in Zim, and then when I was about 17, I suppose that's like grade 10, 11, thereabouts, I got a scholarship to go and study in Swaziland, Eswatini now, a school called Waterford Gamhlaba. And I had the absolute best 2 years of my life, at Waterford. It's a really great school. So, when you get kids who need to, are getting ready to go to varsity, after 2 years at Waterford, I then got another scholarship. I got a whole bunch of scholarships because I didn't have a life. I was just always studying and, doing interesting things. Got admitted to Harvard. So I went to Harvard for my undergrad. And I did something that was very interesting. So I chose a very interesting program, and every single time I would go back home, people would be like, why would you make such a decision when you got this really great opportunity? So when I got to Harvard, I decided that I was going to major in social studies. So if I show you my degree, it's written social studies.
And social studies was like primary school stuff,
exactly.
Right?
So like people are like, why would you leave Zim? We are suffering here to go and do social studies at Harvard. Like, you should be doing engineering, law, economics, etc. You get a proper job, etc. And social studies is kind of like, if you know the UCT programs like PPE. So philosophy, politics, and economics. But I absolutely loved it. If I were to go back and be 19 years old to choose a degree program, I would still choose social studies. It was very incredible. And then after that, I towards the end of my time, got another scholarship, the Rhodes Scholarship, to study at Oxford. And so I did 2 masters there, a master's in African Studies and an MBA. In fact, towards the end of my master's in African Studies, what I really wanted to do was to do a PhD in anthropology. Because I was fascinated by informal economy, and I've always been fascinated, and it's a very core part of what I do, and I just wanted to nerd over informal economy. I don't know if you've got Zimbabweans in the room, but my thesis was going to be on forex traders in Zim. So forex traders in Zim during hyperinflation, so about 2007, 2008, almost everyone in the country was suffering, except for the politicians and the forex traders. And if you're a professor at a university, if you had a proper job, etc., things were really hard. But you had forex traders who literally, and I'm not exaggerating, were buying a house every single month or every other month. And I just wanted to understand, how did they do it? What kind of economic logics did they go through, etc., all that fun stuff. So that's what I was going to do. And then I had a very interesting afternoon. I was invited to a conference in Abu Dhabi towards the end of the master's. I'd actually already gotten admitted to the PhD program. And then towards the end of my master's, go to this conference in Abu Dhabi for about a week. And then the Emiratis that we were at the conference with were like, what, let's take you guys to Dubai for an afternoon, just Friday afternoon, because you guys have been in Abu Dhabi and you haven't really seen the country, so we'll take you to Dubai. Went to Dubai, and I had never experienced that amount of wealth in my life. They had police cars that were Bugattis. And the Emiratis were when you turn 18, everybody gets, I don't know, $30,000, $50,000 or something like that. And on my flight back to Oxford, I decided, what? Forget this PhD stuff and the title, etc. And I literally applied to the MBA program in a week, 2 weeks, and I was like, guys, let's make some money. So that's how I got there.
Brilliant. And tell us about your journey with Strive and Econet. How did it start?
Yeah. So I got to know Strive and his family when I was still at Waterford, Gamhlaba. So it was sort of like I was ending my time in high school there, and they were interested in sending scholarship students, from the countries where Econet and I suppose Liquid operate to Waterford. And so Tsitsi, his wife, before they sent students, was like, let's go first check out the school and see if it's okay. And then the principal and whoever were like, actually, Dalumuzi, you can show her around for the day. So I spent the whole day showing Titi around the school, and then at the end she was like, let's stay in touch, and that's how my relationship with them started. So I think for about, I don't know, until my MBA program, there's a whole bunch of stuff I used to do with their family foundation. And then when I decided I was going to go into business, work, etc., I remember when I did the MBA, I knew I wanted to work for a telco that was based in London, doing mobile money on the continent. And the only 3 companies that ticked those boxes: Vodafone, Millicom, and Econet. So I interviewed with all 3, and because I had a history with the family, I was on their scholarship program in Zim, accepted their offer, started working with them. Initially worked in the mobile money part of the business for 3 months in Zim, and then I just was summoned to Strive's office and told that I was now his assistant.
Wow. That's yeah. And I remember you did some work with Zona, which was a mobile payments company in Zambia, and then that's how we got to know each other. But then now you also now back to Strive, you had interesting work. You guys were in private jets almost every day, right? And lots of wonderful meetings. But so what are some of the lessons you learned from Strive?
Yeah. the lessons are unconventional and make sense now that I've gone through the entrepreneurial journey. Strive is a man of faith, an incredible man of faith. And I mean, like, he's been in business, etc. People think different things about him. But one thing, after working with him for 4 years, I have never met anyone who is such an incredible man of faith in my life. And the reason I say that, you cannot, when you see somebody like him, what you think of is like the material stuff. He's built companies, they're valuable, employs a lot of people, etc. But without faith, all of that, as far as I've processed, it just falls apart. Because the entrepreneurial journey is so tough. You kind of have to be crazy to go down this path. And so many things go wrong. You can look at your numbers and it doesn't make sense. And what the rational thing to do is to close the company. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But you have to tap into, whether it's the universe or it's God or it's the ancestors, whatever it is, you have to tap into that, and that's going to keep you going. And so Strive is an incredible man of faith, and the reason I start with that, he's super smart, etc., all of those incredible things, but all of that falls apart in the absence of, faith. I mean, it's faith in God, but, you can translate that to our, so that's the first thing. The second is, because the journey is so tough, you kind of have to be driven not just by a sense of faith, but you have to be very clear about what is it that you want to achieve, purpose, what's the contribution that you want to make. Because when the days are hard, that bigger picture about what you're going for is what's going to sort of like keep you going. I mean, like, there's stories of how he fought for a license for 5 years, etc., etc. But that shows up in many different ways. And the last thing I will say is, you see these dollar billionaires, particularly whether they're a billionaire from the continent, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. You just need a lot more than just the usual stuff to get there.
Yes, great. Yeah, and I've read like some of his stories. Like, those were really, really tough things that he went through. And now coming to you, tell us about how you started Noto, and was that your first idea, and how many iterations did you go through to end up with the versions that you've got right now?
We're still going through iterations, but the iterations aren't over. I think for me, the starting point, I suppose, were some of the experiences that I had abroad and some of what I saw as realities on the continent. But I'll start off with what the name of the company means. So, as you guys might have figured out, Noto comes from isiZulu, Ndebele in Zim, the word umnoto, which means wealth. And really the mission of our company is to help people build wealth. And a lot of how people build wealth is, you own an asset or you grow value in an asset such as a business. But there are real barriers to building wealth. Particularly, if you're on the continent, in the sense that in order to own an asset or to grow value in an asset, a lot of the times you have to take out credit. Good credit, not like credit for consumption. But to get to that point of accessing that credit, there are a lot of barriers. So if you think about the continent right now, over 70% of people are either self-employed or are supplementing their income through some kind of side hustle, right? And we are focused on consumers and small businesses in the relatively lower income parts of South Africa and the continent. So if you think of Soweto, you think of a hairdresser, a mechanic, an electrician, a plumber, etc., who makes a consistent, amount of money every month. If they walked into a bank, to get a home loan, for example, or a loan to grow their business, they're highly likely to be declined. Not because they are not credit worthy, but because the financial system works in a particular way, right? So they want an employment contract, they want a pay slip, they want to pull a credit report from, you know, TransUnion, Experian. If you don't have credit, they'll be like, okay, if you want this, first go open an Edgar's account, and then you will come back to us, etc. So there's all these barriers.
And they also want to see, like, show us in your statement which one is your salary.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't have that. And it's a structural barrier that exists, or structural gap that exists between how people make money and how they demonstrate that they're credit worthy, and how that is processed by financial institutions. And this is not to blame financial institutions, right? They have to think about, you know, risk, you know, and all of that fun stuff. And in fact, they're regulated entities, and some of those things are coming because that's what the regulator wants to see. When they say, have you done an affordability assessment? Are you getting people over indebted, etc.? So in a situation where, I mean, like, we have lived experience of this, there are people who've got money, but they can't grow beyond what they have, right? And, you know, you can think about in the township, and I like to use this example, you know, for women, the hairdresser that you go to, you know, a lot of women will go to the same hairdresser for like 10, 15, 20 years. Well, that same hairdresser is going to be declined, right? If you're a man, you'll go to the same mechanic to fix your car, 10, 15, 20 years. But that person can't. And it's that really irked me and still irks me, because it means that we are not growing people, we are not growing economies, because the system works in a particular way. So Noto is a little bit, you know, we've got a revolutionary side to us, where we're like, you know what, this system that exists was created by someone. Right? It didn't come out of Noah's Ark. If it was created by someone, surely we can recreate another system that works.
What is Noto?
He's doing that thing to me. Well, like, you talk, and it's like, you haven't said, so what do you do?
I want them to repeat so that they are all your ambassadors. Let's swap mics.
Sure. So, Noto is South Africa's and Africa's first licensed and regulated alternative credit bureau. What that means, you know, I've talked about the system, you know, consumers who can access credit, is we build credit scores and credit reports using alternative data, and because we're licensed, regulated, compliant, we provide those credit scores and credit reports to financial institutions, so they can finally lend to your hairdresser, your mechanic, etc.
Brilliant. Excellent.
So that worked, right? Him asking me to say again.
Yes. No, thank you. And why I just asked that you repeat that is because it's a great concept in terms of the system just looks on one side, right? Like, oh, let's see your proof of income, let's see all of this, but not your consistent expenditure. Like, you pay your rent all the time regularly, meaning you can be trusted with a bond. You know, all of that, which is really, really good. But what's been like your experience now when it came to you pitching that idea and trying to fundraise? And which people got it, which people didn't get it, and what was that journey like?
So it's been very interesting. It's still very interesting. We've got so many more no's than we've got yeses, you know, it's I mean, like, I hope you guys don't say I'm arrogant after I say this, but, like, you know, you're like, I went to Harvard, I went to Oxford, I went for Strive. Surely, just like, just invest in my company, like, you know, it's gonna go well, and it doesn't work that way. So it's been truly humbling. And so how we essentially, I mean, maybe I'll talk about raising money. If we first raised money from friends and family, because we initially had to de-risk the business. It took us 2 years to get a license in South Africa, so regulated by NCR. And only after we got the license, you know, did we start to raise meaningful amounts of money from venture capital firms. So yeah, that's been a very interesting journey, because, you know, you just keep going, and the whole idea is to keep de-risking your business, so that more people feel comfortable about putting money in.
And you talk about, like, it took you 2 years. So a lot of times founders sometimes in a hurry, like this is going to take 2 years. 2 years, no, then you keep doing stuff, but 2 years will still pass, right? Like, oh, maybe we should have started that thing and stuck with it. So well done on that. And then tell us now about some of your milestones, like the raises you've done and now what you're working towards.
Yeah, so from a milestone perspective, we founded in 2020, got our license July 2022. We've raised about, I'm actually going, I'll say it in two currencies. We've raised $3 million, but that doesn't sound like a lot of money. So we've raised 60 million rand. It's better in rands. 60 Sounds better in rands, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, 60 million rands. And we're partnering we have an existing agreement with Old Mutual on the traditional side, bringing something online, working on something online, or something is coming online for the core use of our score. We are actually working with telcos and banks outside of Zim. Outside of SA, Zim is one of the markets in which we're working, where essentially we build alternative scores for telcos, and then we use our scoring engine, which is compliant to produce reports that are consumed by banks.
What were some of the things that you thought, the assumptions you had when you started? You thought this was going to work, and then they were just like forced, they didn't work out. And what were some of the surprises, wonderful surprises?
Yeah. So I think, so I'll talk about the journey with the regulator. It's actually been really fascinating, and I think a lot of the times is the real differential. I know fintech startups don't always like regulators, but there's a lot of value in it, and we actually learned a lot in the process. So when we initially applied for a license, we essentially had built the platform to collect rental data from tenants. And we took that, we actually first got admitted into a regulatory sandbox. So we took that way in the sandbox, etc. Took it to the regulator. The regulator came back to us and say, this is not compliant. So they literally rejected our license application. They said your supplier of data has to be the landlord. Right? And it's so funny because when they say that, we felt some type of way. But if you actually think about it, it makes sense. Because as a tenant, why would I report to you that I'm skipping? Right? It's either I'll just stop telling you, or I'll just find a way. The landlord has got greater incentive to report. But then now the question is, what incentive does the landlord have to come? What immediate incentive does the landlord have to come onto the platform, right? Because we're building the credit score for a tenant to get a home loan, which means we essentially take the best tenants, and then the landlords are like, where am I going to get two tenants? So it's where am I going to get a good tenant? But we solved for that. But the big surprise for us is, I was starting out this fintech, super excited about the idea, etc. And because we put ourselves to be tested against a higher standard, it forced us to really think carefully about fraud, risk, data integrity, and all of that stuff, in a way that I would argue most alternative credit scoring players aren't doing, right? So a lot of alternative credit scoring players, literally the differentiator is the algorithm. But before the data is ingested into the engine that has the algorithm, right, they don't do, and a lot of the times, not all of the time, they don't do a whole bunch of validations and verifications, etc., that meet regulatory standards. So yeah, that's been surprising. I think really, on the positive side of things, I think one of the what has been really amazing, I think, is my team. To be honest, my team. We've gone through a lot together, So those guys, they deserve the equity they will get, because they just show up in ways that I'm even like, why are you showing up like this? So it's just incredible how when people really catch on to a vision and believe, they can really go above and beyond.
Brilliant. That ties in very well with my next question, which is, what were some of your failures, like the moments when you're feeling you're rock bottom, feeling like, why am I doing this? I should have just, tell us about those moments and how did you come out of them, or what gave you the strength?
I think some of those moments were particularly before we raised money from venture capital firms. So, we really almost entirely raised money from friends and family. I can't tell you, how many times we ran out of money. Before we literally would run out of money and there's like nothing in the bank account, but you've got obligations that you have to meet. Right? That's hard because, if you've got a team, and they have to pay rent. It's actually the most weird thing, right? An alternative credit bureau, and you're getting a letter of demand. Well, this is before we got the license, right? But I think really, and to your point about just don't die, it's hard. It's hard having to go and face people and say, I'm going to miss payroll, right? I'm going to miss payroll, and they come to you and they say, so give us a date. And I don't have a date. Right? Because, but then they're, as I said, we had friends and family, so many people bailed us out at many different times. And a lot of times, sometimes you'll have raised money, and you've signed, but like people are just taking their sweet time to send the money to you. And you've got to tell people, sorry, I'm missing payroll, their suppliers breathing down your neck, so that's hard. Yeah.
And what advice do you have, like generally from now your experience, right? Is the stuff you learned in class, stuff you learned, and then now from going through this journey, what experience or what advice would you have for people in the room and the people who are going to watch this later?
That's the reason I say that's a deep question is because I'm a very reflective person, and so there's a lot I can say.
You can go ahead. We're here all night. Let's go.
I think, and maybe this was because of where I am in my life right now and the space I'm in right now. You asked me a question about Strive, and the first thing that I said was about faith. This journey is so hard in many cases that you really need to be doing it for the right reasons. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you're doing it for the right reasons or not. If you're not doing it for the right reasons, you're going to die. Right? And it's a very weird thing. Like if you're literally just doing it for the money, to be like, there's a number I want to hit. And when I hit that number, I want to do X, Y, Z. You've got a much greater chance of dying. If you're doing it from a deep sense of purpose, it increases your chances of being successful. It's actually funny. I was having a chat with one of my teammates the other day. Somehow people are always fascinated by the fact that I worked for Strive. And so he asked me, he's like, and we're just talking about some of my, the experiences, etc. And it's like, when they say somebody is a billionaire, what does it mean? And there's a technical definition of what a billionaire is, right? You've got a set of assets. They have a certain percentage shareholding in the company or in the group of companies, and then you take their liabilities and you subtract from that, and then that's your net worth. So that's the technical definition of a billionaire. But there are certain things that you have to be a certain person, right? You have to be a certain person, whether it's like sense of purpose, your capacity for taking risk, your ability to lead, your ability to take people through really tough times, the ability to convince, etc., which a number doesn't fully capture. And I use the example sometimes, you can't save your way. And maybe, okay, now I'm exaggerating, but you can't save your way to being a dollar millionaire, right? To be like, I'll take 10% of my salary and then, after X amount of time, I'll be a millionaire. You have to, at some point, take risks.
Yes.
And when you take those risks, sometimes things go great, sometimes they don't go great. And the question is, who are you going to be as a person when those tough times comes, as you work your way towards, achieving your purpose or etc. And the last thing I will say is, we're here, we want to make money, we want to be wealthy. I'm like, no one is here starting a company because you don't want to make a lot of money, right? But what is a billionaire? I would say literally it's a scorecard. It's a measure of what you have done and contributed. It's not about the number. And I think, the more we think about it in that way, it just changes how we show up in the world and to our work.
Fantastic. We're going to take questions from the audience. Think about your questions. And while we're getting questions, what unpopular opinion do you have about entrepreneurship? Like stuff that, where like on TV you're supposed to say certain things, but privately you'll be like, no.
What unpopular opinion do I have about entrepreneurs? This is going to get me into a lot of trouble. But I think it's something that we all know. And I'll frame it this way. A president of a country must think of themselves in a particular way for them to think they can run a country. You must think like, I'm the ish. Right? I'm going to hire ministers, I'm going to fire ministers. I will determine the life outcomes of millions of people. And you know what? That person is me. Same with entrepreneurs.
Yes.
I don't think there's a humble entrepreneur that exists. You really have to think you're the ish.
I totally agree with that. I do. And then because it's true that you have to believe that whilst it might be tough, you would succeed. Like, I'm the one to make this change. And
I don't care what you're saying.
Yes. Exactly.
I will do it. And the funny thing is, if you can't be that, chances are you'll struggle. You need a base set of skills to enable the vision. But the reason I started Noto is because I had worked in the telco space and I'd done stuff in fintech. But then also remember the thesis I was going to do was going to be on stuff on the informal economy. So I was always alive to just how things work in the informal sector. And I just didn't take it as a given, for example, that the only way to get information is through a payslip and an employment contract, because there are people making lots of money without that stuff. So if you take that as and I think because of my training in anthropology, I just take things. I don't like to impose models onto how things work. I like to prefer to understand how things work and then sort of like surface what the model is. So my training in anthropology actually did help. I then did an MBA. When you're raising money, you have to be building financial models. I literally built our financial model from the first cell to the last, and we're always updating it, and I'm skilled enough to do it. This is an admission. This looks like a safe space that I'm happy to. I can't put a gun to my head and ask me to code one line. I can't. But I'm the founder and CEO of a fintech company. Right?
Brilliant.
Because I'm fortunate, which is the team, they show up, I'm like, guys, this is the vision, these are the regulations, this is what we want to achieve, etc.
Yeah.
Boom, let's build. And we've built literally, from the first line of code, we own the entire IP. We've never outsourced or done anything. Everything has been built in-house. And that's because I think part of it really is as a founder, CEO, you've got vision, skills, etc. But you need to be able to sell that vision, convince people, and just look people in the face and say, bruh, I can't code.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I can raise money.
All right.
So let's make this work, So
Cool.
it's that. Yeah.
All right.
I think the sooner you're focused on building out systems and processes, the better. And I think literally that's my short answer to that. If you think about, MTN generates tens of billions of dollars in revenue. Their CEO is Ralph. The more you master systems and processes, and just like make them work, the better. And we've gone through that journey, and I don't know, it depends on the person. But if you are a visionary founder, etc., you're selling things, the last thing that you want to be doing is defining systems and processes and documenting them and following up, etc. It's not fun. But it's the surest way of getting to a point that if you're knocked down by a bus, your company will outlive you.
How amazing was that? Big hand.